The Battle of Iwo Jima saw more medals of honor awarded than any other fight in U.S. history, but it also saw Marines torching men alive. The weapon that won the battle is now banned by almost every modern army. We're going to break down how that happened, why flamethrowers became essential, and what it did to the people who used them, which explains why flamethrowers are practically banned in modern warfare. If the only way to save your friends was to burn your enemy alive, could you do it? That's exactly the choice young Marines faced at Iwo Jima, where the terrain, the enemy, and the tactics forced them into hellish decisions. We're going to explore what really happened in those tunnels, how the flamethrower became a tool for survival, and why it still haunts the men who pulled the trigger. Chapter 1. Hell on Earth. Imagine an island so small, just 8 square miles, that it's literally tinier than most major airports. But in early 1945, this bleak chunk of volcanic rock suddenly looms colossal. That's Iwo Jima, sitting smack between the marinas where B-29S staged and mainland Japan. American planners figured if they grabbed it, to have a forward airbase for escorts, emergency landings, and early warning stations against incoming Japanese attacks. That strategic rationale is confirmed in U.S. Navy and Marine Corps histories, noting Iwo's bomber path interception role and fighter escort value. When Marines stormed the beaches on February 19, 1945, they hoped for a quick fight. But what unfolded over 36 days was anything but short. 6,821 Americans died, and nearly 19,217 were wounded during the main battle phase, with total American casualties topping around 26,000. The Japanese defenders were also brutal. Of approximately 21,000 Japanese troops, some 17,800 to 18,375 were killed, with only about 216 taken prisoner. The terrain itself was a nightmare. Black volcanic ash and sand soaked up every explosion and slowed every step. There was no cover, just a scorched, wind-blown slope in front of tens of thousands of machine guns and artillery. The bombarded craters often helped the Japanese defenders by giving them hiding spots, with the island's volcanic geology turning it into a killing field, not a battlefield. And one man, General Kuribayashi, set up the deadly maze. Before we go on to the next section, please don't forget to subscribe if you've liked the video so far. Chapter 2. The Deadly Maze. Kuribayashi knew the gig was up before he even landed. He studied in America, understood U.S. power, and realized straight-up defense on the beaches was suicide. Instead, he opted for something radical: defense in depth. He issued a clear order: no flashy bonsai charges, no wasting lives for pride. His mission? Bleed the Americans dry in a grinding war of attrition. That choice is documented clearly in Marine Corps history. Kuribayashi forbade bonsai attacks, even when urged by superiors, because they were futile waste. Over the span of nearly a year before D-Day, his troops carved out a fortress underground. They dug over 11 miles, 18 kilometers, of tunnels, built thousands of caves, bunkers, pillboxes, and hidden artillery positions across Mount Suribachi and the Motoyama Plateau. About 25% of his 21,000-strong garrison was assigned solely to tunneling, creating small caves for squads and massive chambers that could hold hundreds, all with multiple exits and interlocking passages to avoid entrapment and enable quick redeployment. From letters and radio messages he sent during the battle, the tone is chilling and determined. For our homeland, until the very last man, our duty is to stop the enemy right here. Do not expect to return home alive, he said, which is exactly what he wrote in his letters and later appeared in both Japanese military diaries and translated war logs. Another message sums it up: you must not expect my survival, confirming that Kuribayashi understood this wasn't a defense. It was martyrdom. Chapter 3, Day 1, February 19th, 1945. D-Day at Iwo Jima. At 8:59 a.m., the first assault wave hit the beaches. LVTs carrying machine guns and 75mm howitzers joined infantry, stepping off into volcanic ash and pure chaos. Over 30,000 Marines had landed by nightfall, and roughly 40,000 more would follow in the coming days. The plan called it a mop-up landing. Light resistance expected, thanks to a week of aerial and naval bombardment. But what Marines found instead was a ghostly silence, followed by a tidal wave of fire. After about an hour, Japanese machine guns, mortars, and artillery roared to life, punishing the crowded beach where troops and gear had piled up in the ash and craters. One veteran described it as the soil underfoot erupting with hundreds of exploding landmines, and men walking into machine gun fire crumpled and fell under concussion waves. Time Life correspondent Robert Sherrard later called it a nightmare in hell. By mid-afternoon, the beach was jam-packed. The ash made footing treacherous, and the LVTs couldn't climb slopes. Marines had to dismount and slog inland under fire. Every shell hole held a dead or wounded Marine. Historian Derek Wright noted that in virtually every one, there'd be at least one dead body. By the end of the day, casualties were brutal. Around 8% of the landing force, roughly 2,420 Marines, killed or wounded. Just to secure a beachhead perimeter nearly 4,000 yards wide and 1,000 yards deep, the Japanese had waited until the beach was heavily packed, then opened fire with surgical timing. It was a deadly trap. The Marines landed expecting to mow down enemy trenches, but quickly discovered they weren't fighting in open ditches. They were fighting ghosts in caves. The Japanese had turned Iwo Jima's volcanic rocks into an underground fortress. Instead of popping up at trenches, defenders peeked out of hidden doors, fired, and vanished back into the earth. That tactical nightmare comes straight from official Marine Corps accounts, which describe Iwo's defenses as the most elaborate in the Pacific. The island's nerve center was its caves. By battle time, more than 11 miles, 18 kilometers, of tunnels and thousands of caves and pillboxes had been carved into the slopes of Mount Suribachi and the northern plateau. Japan even assigned about 25% of its 21,000-man garrison purely to tunneling duties, studied in detail in U.S. Marine Corps post-action reports, which meant that when American artillery and bombs fell, they mostly hit empty dirt. The Navy blasted the island for months before the landings, but craters just doubled as hiding spots, softening the effect of bombardment rather than destroying defenders. Even heavy shells couldn't collapse well-built concrete pillboxes or sealed bunker doors. As Lieutenant Colonel Williams observed, even 105mm howitzers would hardly shiver the concrete pillboxes. General Holland, Howlin' Mad Smith, later called Japanese fortifications on Iwo the most elaborate in the Pacific. That label wasn't hype. He was describing interconnected bunkers, deep tunnels, camouflaged artillery, sniper nests, and blockhouses designed to resist bombardment and outlast a traditional assault. So standard weapons stopped being useful real fast. The Japanese would melt back into the rock, only to strike from another opening minutes later. Fighters tried strafing, tanks rolled up to pillboxes, and still got blown apart because crews vanished underground before the tanks arrived. Marines realized early, this wasn't a fight you could win by shooting at a rock. You needed fire, or something to flush them out. And that realization would lead straight to flamethrowers. Chapter 5, Hellfire Unleashed. When flamethrowers rolled onto Iwo Jima, the game changed in a brutal instant. The Marines brought in portable M2 infantry flamethrowers, but the real shock came from the M4 Sherman tanks modified with Navy Mark I flame systems. Nicknamed Ronson, or Zippo tanks. Each of these landed on D-Day, but saw action by D+2, and quickly became the Marines' most valuable tool for flushing out fortified bunkers and caves. They were absolute tanks of terror in steel suits. These tanks spewed pressurized napalm, a fuel mix under about 300 psi that could reach up to 400 feet, roughly 50 to 120 yards. In combat conditions, they usually hit targets within 80 yards reliably. But that range meant you could reach into tunnel openings without inching forward. It ignited instantly and seared through steel grating and concrete bunker slits. Then there's Herschel Woody Williams, the legend. On February 23, 1945, enemy pillboxes pinned down his unit. Most men were casualties. He volunteered alone with his flamethrower, rolled up under fire, jammed the nozzle into an air vent, and fired until the defenders were gone. That action cleared the way for advancing infantry and earned him the Medal of Honor. Williams himself later said bullets ricocheted off his fuel tank as he crawled closer, refusing to back down because going backward meant death. Portable flame units, the M2 backpack version, suffered horrific casualty rates, up to 92%, because operators had to get close and were obvious targets. As the battle ground on, infantry squads refused to move without flame tanks in position. Tanks became the lifeline of assaults. Marines literally waited, counting casualties, until a flame tank backed them up. So suddenly, darkness had a price tag. Flames turned caves from safe havens into death traps. The arrival of mechanized flamethrowers unleashed a weapon that could literally burn the shadows away, and won fights that bullets, bombs, and blades couldn't. Chapter 6. The Price of Flame. This is where words feel inadequate, because fire on Iwo Jima didn't just kill, it cooked. Every flame assault into a bunker was terror, not surgical clearing. Navy medical teams and Marine unit reports confirmed that when flamethrowers hit sealed tunnels, survivors inside were often charred beyond recognition, and some bodies literally melted against cave walls. Eugene Sledge, the Marine who wrote with The Old Breed, made this personal. He described the stench of burning flesh as overwhelming, almost physical. He wrote that no field sanitation or fresh air could mask how nauseating it became. That visceral memory appears repeatedly in his memoirs, which draws on his experiences in Peleliu and Okinawa, but also reflects similar fire damage horrors from Iwo. Medical records from corpsmen at Iwo Jima show casualty rates twice as high as Saipan, with corpsmen themselves suffering massive losses trying to help burn survivors and burn Japanese captives. Rare, but shocking, were brought in alive. Marines and corpsmen testified to treating a Japanese soldier whose skin had been scorched, but who could still breathe. That's why medical staff often describe the recovery zones as chaotic. Evacuation overwhelmed by injury and horror. Portable flamethrower units had casualty rates so extreme, up to 92%, because operators were high-value targets and had almost no cover. Flame tank crews became critical because infantry just refused to move without them positioned first. Fire didn't just remove the enemy, it erased them. Tanks that breathed napalm turned dark, hidden caves into ovens. Marines walked into places that smelled like death incarnate. Chapter 7. Turning the Tide. When flamethrowers finally became the go-to tool, Marines learned fast. If you wanted to clear a bunker without losing half your squad, fire was your only friend. The 4th and 5th Marine Divisions reported that hundreds of Japanese bunkers and caves were cleared using flamethrowers. What used to take days of grinding assaults suddenly took a few terrifying bursts, with soldiers finally making progress, inch by brutal inch. Squads quickly became dependent on flame tanks. Early in the fight, the M4 Sherman-based flame tanks, equipped with Navy Mark I systems, were limited in number, but as soon as they went into action on D+2, infantry units started waiting for them before pushing forward. They wouldn't go near a bunker without one backing them up. Some Marine squads even carried extra napalm tanks in case flame tanks were delayed, because the casualty rates for portable flamethrower operators were sky high, up to 92%. Tank-mounted systems gave range, protection, and a horrifying shock value that troops quickly appreciated. Sergeant Bill Gnaust, a combat cameraman with the 5th Marine Division, filmed not just the famous flag raising, but also the cave-by-cave elimination of Japanese defenders, flamethrower attacks included. That footage still appears in Iwo Jima documentaries today. Tragically, he was killed in March while filming a cave-clearing operation. Flame and fury turned the tide. Those tanks weren't just weapons. They were psychological weapons. Japanese defenders reportedly feared them more than any other tank system. And for Marines, that burning frontline support was often the difference between survival and getting chewed up. They turned a failing assault into a steady, brutal progress. That's drama with numbers to back it. Hundreds of bunkers down, days of fighting saved, and a tool that became indispensable by the time Iwo Jima was signed off as secure. Chapter 8. The Last Stand. As U.S. forces pushed into the northern end of Iwo, the Japanese defenders dug even deeper, literally. They had holed up in massive cave systems that sometimes resisted flamethrower attacks for days. In one documented case, Marines spent 3 days trying to clear a single cave. They'd flame one entrance, only to have defenders slip out another entrance and counterattack from behind. It turned assaults into tense standoffs, room by room, with no quick exit. Japanese radio intercepts from March 23rd and 24th contained chilling farewells. One message to Chichijima said, "All officers and men of Chichijima, goodbye from Iwo." Final messages confirmed Kuribayashi understood defeat was near. On March 25th, a force of about 300 Japanese troops launched a silent, planned counterattack near Airfield 2 that lasted up to 90 minutes. At least 53 Americans were killed and 120 wounded. There's speculation that Kuribayashi personally led this last strike, or that he died that night, though his body was never confirmed. One Marine veteran later summed it up in a single line: "You didn't kill them, you erased them." That was the grim reality. The cave systems allowed defenders to vanish one moment and strike again the next. That resilience and the ferocity of their final stand made every advance cost multiple casualties. Even after the island was officially declared secure on March 26th, about 3,000 Japanese soldiers continued hiding in caves. The U.S. Army's 147th Infantry Regiment spent months rooting them out. Over that post-war period, they killed about 1,602 Japanese in small skirmishes, while suffering 15 killed and 144 wounded, eventually capturing 867 prisoners. By the time it was over, Iwo Jima had become less a ground war and more a subterranean struggle. Every bunker was a potential trap, every tunnel a death sentence. Marines weren't just fighting men, they were fighting terrain filled with ghosts committed to dying underground. The enemy's last stand was exactly that, a final, silent fury beneath the island's surface. Chapter 9. Did anyone win? By March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima was officially declared secure. But calling it a victory feels complicated when the scoreboard read nearly 7,000 Americans dead and more than 19,000 wounded during the 36-day fight. This was the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history in terms of sheer numbers of casualties. Some might point to the medals as proof of heroism. In fact, 27 medals of honor were awarded to Marines and sailors, more than any other single battle in U.S. history. That total represents over a quarter of all MOHs awarded to Marines during World War II. But medals don't erase nightmares. Most men on the island weren't thinking about medals. They were thinking about what they'd done and what they'd seen. Eugene Sledge summed up the surreal horror when he wrote, "With the old breed, it was like landing on another planet, one ruled by death." That quote captures the alien landscape of smoke, ash, ruins, and constant fear, one that stayed with veterans for life. Yes, the island was secured, The airfields were captured. Fighter escorts from Iwo went on to support bombing missions, and wounded crews found refuge there. But at what price? Nearly 27,000 Americans became casualties overall, including 6,821 killed and over 19,000 wounded, with Japan losing nearly all of its 21,000 defenders. So was this a victory or a tragedy? It was both. The military wins a strategic foothold. America gains forward bases and rescue fields. But the men who stormed those beaches and descended into the tunnels came back haunted, not triumphant. Their medals told the world they had valor, but their stories told a different truth. That victory sometimes smells like fire and tastes like ash, and it demands everything and more from those who fight it. Chapter 10. Scarred Legacy. It's quiet now on Iwo Jima, even peaceful, if you ignore the volcanic rock and silent tunnels. Once, this place breathed fire. Flamethrowers, once vital for victory, were quietly phased out globally. By 1978, the U.S. military had completely removed flamethrowers from its arsenal. They survived into Korea and Vietnam on M132 vehicles, but were deemed too brutal and tactically limited for modern wars. Most armies followed suit, banning flamethrowers by the 1970s. The weapon wasn't outlawed internationally by default, but using it against civilians or forest cover is illegal under the UN's protocol on incendiary weapons. But the legacy remains. Many Marines carried psychological scars. Herschel Woody Williams, who famously burned pillboxes on February 23, 1945, survived where only about 18 of over 300 flamethrower operators did on Iwo. He later explained that he didn't want to burn anyone. He just wanted to come home alive. He struggled with nightmares for years, until a religious awakening around 1962 helped him cope. In interviews, he broke down, discussing the friends and men he'd lost, and now every burst of flame carried a cost far beyond the battlefield. Today, Iwo Jima sits silent. The tunnels remain underground, some still rumored to faintly smell of fuel in damp conditions. Veterans who returned described the lingering odor of burned oil and ash that haunted their dreams. Flamethrowers won battles. They cleared caves no rifle, bomb, or tank could, but they cost souls. The tool became outlawed. The scars never faded. And veterans like Williams spent decades explaining that they weren't monsters. They were survivors who did whatever they had to do to make it out. That's the legacy of fire at Iwo Jima. Victory soaked in horror and lessons burned into memory. But what do you think? If flamethrowers were the only way to win, does that make them justified or unforgivable? Let us know in the comments below. Here's another video history buffs enjoyed watching. Goodbye for now.